Hello everyone, it is Dark Symphony 777 with, well, a re-review of It Came from the Deep Sea by Super Mario Bros. Ultimate. Now I bet you're wondering, why are you doing a re-review of the story? Because kind of reviewed it either yesterday or earlier today, depending on when I upload this video. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing. So I actually want to make this very clear. I'm kind of doing this part unedited because, well, I do all my videos unedited because I don't know how to edit, and because of work I usually don't have the time to edit it. But that's beside the point. More or less, what happened is the review you actually saw that was uploaded when talking specifically about It Came from the Deep Sea. While I was doing the first take of it, because the review is actually the second take of it, I inadvertently switched to Frozen Thawing Heart, which is actually going to be the next fic I'm going to review, unless something happens, like work-related incidents, and I'm going to probably get something else kind of just to cover it up while I work on this story, while I work on getting through this story. And I kept that tab on inadvertently throughout most of my review of It Came from the Deep Sea, and by the time I realized what happened, I was pretty much done talking about it, and I noticed, oh shit. And I scrambled to completely kind of just redo the whole thing, and that kind of threw me off. Admittedly, it also didn't help that I kind of goofed up on the review, because honestly, for the original video, I was really only going to review Admire to Kill. However, by the time I finished it, I realized, dang, the story's short. And I would have known that if goddamn Wattpad didn't have a way to actually show how many words are in the story, which is another issue I have with Wattpad. Sorry, I needed to get that out of my system. Point is, I kind of took It Came from the DC as like a last minute thing because I only had two other short stories and I was going to do those together. And then Mario Brothers kind of suggested, hey, can you review the story? It's like, oh, I can work with this. and I just lumped it with Admire to Kill and didn't realize that it kind of doing it at like the last minute kind of would cause issues. So for that, I do apologize to the author. I also apologize to my girlfriend because honestly, I know for a fact that the moment she finds out about this, she's gonna get like secondhand embarrassment because like she's probably gonna message me and just like dark. And I was like, all right, I'm going to the doghouse, which I kind of deserve. but I did want to at least do this little preamble specifically for the author. I do apologize for the goof up. This is on my end. So for that, I do apologize. I didn't want to tell you at first because I was just embarrassed. Like, oh yeah, how would you feel if like most of your review was on a completely different fic and you didn't realize until you were pretty much done with it? So I was like, oh, okay. and honestly, the pausing, all the pausing was me constantly just looking at the screen to make sure I didn't do it again. Oh god, I really didn't want to do it again. So yeah, I do apologize for that. Well, I will. I do have a script lined up. Don't worry. I just wanted to get this beginning part with like no script and just kind of speak from the heart because that's what I got. That's what I like doing. Be honest. So for clarity's sake, I'm going to only talk about the plot and the characters in the story, just like I did with the Bee Who Couldn't Fit, mainly because the pacing and the story structure and the grammar are completely fine and aren't really worth talking about in a review sort of sense. Like I said, I only really plan on reviewing this mainly because I kind of goofed up and I'm admitting my wrongdoing. Shorthand for the plot. Basically, Pearl is bored one day. She basically just goes to her friend's house, and all of them are various degrees of distress. Belle is actually molting, which is like a honey hiver sickness sort of deal. It's treated as like a bigger deal than Pearl knows because Pearl's like oh yeah, that's another mistake. I'm just adding this part because I realized I goofed up. The author actually informed me that I got the ages wrong. I just kind of thought that Pearl was 12. She's actually 8, so bear with me on that. Back to the plot. Belle is sick with molting. Brooke is actually doing a science experiment. She's actually crunching on a big project. However, she's also suffering from molting. She just hasn't reached the part where the molt fully happened yet, so she's just kind of trying to cram in a bunch of her science project before the molting happens. So Brooke's out of the picture, and Brittany is out of town, so Pearl can't really hang out with her. So Pearl, being the intuitive kid she is, comes home crying, basically kind of bummed out that she can't hang out with her friends. She talks to her mom and her aunt a bit, and her mom basically suggested, well, we'll just go to the beach, and even invites the aunt to join them at the beach. Hey, you want to come with us, Aunt Obsidia? And Obsidia obviously just gives like 0 fucks. She's kind of bitch. So Pearl and her mom go to visit the what's it? What is that? Here it is. Chrysocolla Coast. Yeah, that's it. That's it. So they basically go to the Crystal Coast, and Pearl decides to think of an idea that, hey, I'm going to get a necklace. I'm gonna make a seashell necklace for Belle and Brooke for as a get well gift, because she finds out that they're molting, and she wants to wish them luck. So she starts going around the beach. She goes to a more abandoned side of the beach, where she comes across this big gigantic shell. All right, nothing too bad about that. However, when she tries to move the shell, it turns out the shell is actually inhabited by what is called a deep seer. I'm honestly making up the name because it's a little sea slug girl by the name of Squishy, and she's from the deep sea kingdom. So I'm just gonna call her a deep seedian or something like that. If I'm wrong, just honestly, author correct me either through like messaging or through comment. So yeah. Point is, Squishy, the little deep seayan, basically got lost. She was swimming around, or more accurately, crawling around the deep sea kingdom when she comes across the same type of pipe that Pearl got in the first story, where it kind of sucked her up to the Mushroom Kingdom. So Pearl basically decides, well, we got to figure out how to get you home, but I don't want to get home because I'm lonely, and I just want a friend. And so they both become friends with each other. That was quick. They basically introduce themselves. Squishy introduces herself to Pearl's mother. Pearl's mother, Ruby, basically suggests, well, we gotta take her home. Well, can we just show her around? Ruby's basically goes, well, okay, as long as you're back by night. And that's basically what the story's main plot is. It takes place over a single day, where Pearl just introduces Squishy and takes her around not only parts of the Underworld Kingdom, but also mostly the Mushroom Kingdom. It's a really simple plot for what it's trying to convey, and I really appreciate that. One thing I'm not a fan of, and I do have to at least mention my problems that I did in the first review, is I'm not really a big fan of the whole Mushroom Kingdom side plot thing. I'm more of a fan of the interactions between the characters, because honestly, the reason why I liked the first story was the interaction between Pearl and Belle. They honestly felt like natural friends and really worked off well with one another. But hearing Squishy and Pearl basically kind of behave the same. The only difference is that Pearl is basically has restraint and Squishy doesn't, because, well, Squishy's 5, so it makes sense why she wouldn't have restraint. It doesn't really work as well as Pearl and Belle. This is kind of the strength when it comes to like characters in like large scale media, like say like Naruto or One Piece or something like that. Any really medium where like a group of people kind of have to hang out with one another. They usually try and go for like different personalities and all that to kind of help balance each other's strengths and weaknesses. It's kind of the issue why you really don't often see characters with similar personalities kind of be friends with each other in like any sorts of medium. It can happen, like say Mordecai and Rigby. They technically count as like similar personalities, but there's enough differences between them to at least say like, yeah, they're distinct personalities with their own likes and dislikes. Meanwhile, Pearl and Squishy are more or less just the same character. The only difference is that Squishy doesn't really have as much restraint on consequences that Pearl does due to her age, which I can understand. I can understand that Squishy, is more prone to get headlong into trouble because of her age. She doesn't really know what the consequences are. I can accept that. Point is, when it comes back to the plot, I just don't think it works. This whole traveling to the Mushroom Kingdom. I get that, the author wanted to do like a dynamic between Pearl and Squishy, and that's fine. That's fine. I can accept that. The issue is it just doesn't work, and it kind of comes off as flat. It's not as entertaining, and that's mainly due to the fact that the dynamic between Pearl and Squishy I just didn't find that great. And it's kind of bleeds throughout the entire Mushroom Kingdom sequence, where due to actual biological differences, Squishy can't actually leave the water because otherwise she would just shrivel up, which is actually, I believe, something that is real with sea slugs, which is what she's based off. So Pearl's bright idea is just put like some to fill up her little wagon with seawater, and then just plop Squishy in there, and then she just carts her around. And it's like, yeah, that's a pretty adorable image, and basically uses that to travel the Mushroom Kingdom, so that way Squishy can travel along without drying out and dying. So they go up to the Mushroom Kingdom. They actually run into Belle's brother Benny and Belle's father. Shit, I actually forgot his name. I'll just call him Bjorn. I know that's not his name, but just bear with me. I'm just gonna call him Bjorn for comedic existence because I know he's a firefighter. You know what? I'm just gonna look it up. I'm just gonna find his name real quick. Wesley. Okay, that's his name. It's not Bjorn. Just ignore the fact I said Bjorn. I just forgot his. I just had a brain fart and forgot his name, despite the fact I literally only read this story like a couple days ago. Point is, they run into Benny and Wesley. Benny and Wesley decide to invite the girls to a monster truck rally, which, you know, they planned on inviting Belle, but Belle got sick before, you know, that happened and kind of dropped on them, so they kind of had two seats open. Pearl and Squishy kind of accept the invitation. They kind of, you know, they took the seats, everything. For some reason, the stadium's owned by Waluigi. I guess it's a reference to Mario Kart Double Dash, but it's kind of funny. It's like, Waluigi time. It's time to monster truck. Hey, Waluigi. Yes? Where'd you get the monster trucks? Shh, don't ask. Don't ask questions you're not prepared to answer for. And basically, they're just doing a bunch of tricks and all that. It's typical monster truck stuff. If you actually looked up monster trucks, then it's actually pretty entertaining. If I remember right, there wasn't like an actual professional wrestler who actually transitioned to monster truck carts. I don't know why I call them carts. Monster truck rallies. I wonder if she was any good at it. The point is, Squishy gets overly excited over the entire event, and so starts pushing the wagon of herself, basically implying the whole kids kind of doing things without realizing that it's dangerous thing, because a lot of kids just tend to think they're immortal. It's a common thing. Don't worry. I'm not gonna criticize the author for portraying Squishy like this, because it's actually realistic for a kid to act like this. I know I did act like this when I was younger. So, you know, it's common. So Squishy gets onto the field. Everyone starts freaking out, especially, you know, Pearl, because, you know, not only is she the one watching over her, but the fact that, oh no, I may have disobeyed my mom protecting her. However, Squishy gets a Mega Mushroom and just destroys the monster trucks. Okay. However, they manage to cure that with a Mini Mushroom. They get him out of the stadium. It's like, oh, Wesley's like not worried. It's like, we had to deal with Belle like this when she was Squishy's age. It's expected. I know how dangerous it is because kids act like this, so I'm not that mad. A little mad, but not that mad. So, and it turns out no one really got hurt. The worst thing that happened is just the monster trucks got destroyed. It's like, okay. So Wesley decides to invite Pearl and Belle to a pool. So since Pearl is more associated with Chrysola Coast, Pearl decides to let's have fun. Let's go to a pool. They go to a pool. They see how clean the water is because of ocean and a rich a chloride pool. Though I don't know, is the pool chloride? I don't know. It's one of those things you kind of have to suspend your disbelief, because I think like chloride is poisonous to like sea life or stuff like that. So realistically, if we go by like biology, Squishy probably wouldn't be able to walk the pool. But I'm gonna go assumption that there's no chloride in the pool. It's just spring water and stuff like that they regularly clean out, or magic. You know, anything could happen. They just chill on the pool. They kind of relax and goof off, and as it happens, Wario and Waluigi, still very bitter about what happened with the monster trucks, walk past the pool. They basically are upset that Waluigi lost like all this finance because this little random kid just showed up out of nowhere, destroyed his monster trucks, and he lost a lot of money from it. So they're walking by the pool. Wario basically looks at the pool, sees Squishy's self, because her shell actually has a bunch of gems on it. Apparently, I think it has something to do with glowing in the dark. Probably acts like a beacon or something like that. Waluigi notices, hey, wait a minute, that's the girl who destroyed my monster trucks. Look at all those gems on the shell. Right. So, Wario and Waluigi decide to do a little get-rich-quick scheme. Trick the girls into basically kind of going like, we're here to cut your hair. Ignore the fact that Squishy technically doesn't have hair. She kind of wears like a dead squid. I don't know if that works the same way as like Pearl's hair, which is like rock and you need like special shears to cut it. But point is, they try and get rich off the schemes while trying to yank the gems off the shell and trying to cut Pearl's hair so that way they can sell them for money to kind of recoup the loss of the monster trucks. Benny sees the whole thing, tries to stop them. However, he's just a little kid. He doesn't really have the strength of Bell to kind of back him up. He tries to do the Stingu Bidoken, and like they're just not taking the kid seriously. He's like, eh. But they give up once they realize that they're not really cutting the hair is taking too long, and it's like impossible to get the pieces of the shell, the gems off the shell. So they just kind of give up and run off when they realize, yeah, it's not worth it right now. Granted, they do get their comeuppance at the end of the story where they try and get the piece of Pearl's hair that they did grab, and it kind of goes inert and comes to like a regular rock, and they kind of just get bummed. After that, Pearl says goodbye to Benny, says goodbye to Wesley, says that she's gonna try and visit Pearl when the molting's done. She takes Squishy back to, well, they all agree to take Squishy back to the coast, so they kind of say goodbye. They kind of deal with like an amber piranha, which I think is actually really cool concept, like a piranha plant made like partially made of gems, either partially or completely made of gems, whichever one. It's a cool design. It just sounds really intimidating. They finally get back to the coast, and Pearl's mother is hanging out with and talking with Squishy's mother, who's kind of like somewhat panicking that, you know, Squishy was gone for so long, because again, Squishy is 5 years old, not really much you can do about that. Squishy asks him if she can continue hanging out with Pearl. Squishy's mother says yes, and so they eventually just, you know, they go back home. Granted, they also run into like Aunt Obsidia again, and she's kind of like her bitch ass self again. So I'm completely fine. In terms of the plot, well, I'm not a big fan of the Mushroom Kingdom side of things, because I honestly think the whole Mushroom Kingdom thing should be its own story. Basically, just have Squishy kind of introduced and run around Pearl's Kingdom. And in the future story, the bees come down into the underwear. They kind of run into Squishy. They kind of, mainly Brooke, gives her this big, like, moving cart something, and then they take her up to the Mushroom Kingdom. I think it also would help with like dynamics and stuff like that, because like I said, I'm not a fan of Squishy and Pearl's dynamic. Squishy is much better with the bees, and like the very end of the story has Squishy and the bees kind of communicating and talking to each other, and their dynamic is 100% better, and that's really it. When it comes to the characters, there's really only two characters worth talking about, and that's Pearl and Squiggly. I keep thinking, I'm sorry for constantly saying Squiggly. It's just Squishy and Squiggly are just too similar, and I keep thinking of Squiggly from Skullgirls. I apologize. When it comes to the characters, first off is Pearl. We have a picture of Pearl right here. She's a little adorable right here with her little wagon. Pearl doesn't really have much of a character arc or character development in the story. However, that is completely fine, because Pearl in the story's role is supposed to be similar to that of Belle's in the first story. Belle basically introduced Pearl and showed her to this entire new world, the Mushroom Kingdom and the Honey Hive Kingdom, and all these special areas so that Pearl can get to know Belle. Belle basically is Pearl in this. Well, Pearl takes the role of Belle in this story, where Pearl basically just shows Squishy around not only the underwear but also the Mushroom Kingdom. Doesn't introduce herself to bring her to Honey Hive yet, because the bees are still sick, so it's like probably not worth it. And just shows her around and kind of gets to know how Squishy acts and how she behaves and her biology and all that. It's a fun role for Pearl, because she now has to deal with someone younger than her, someone similar to her, so So it's a good role for Pearl to kind of interact and kind of do something different with her. Even if at her core her character is kind of shallow, again it works with this case because all of the character moments and all the character development is front loaded onto Squishy, and I'm 100% behind just Pearl staying as she is. With Squishy, personally, and again I'm repeating myself from the original review, I'm not a fan of Squishy. It's not that I don't hate Squishy. I think personally Squishy just doesn't work for me. It's again a issue where Squishy and Pearl's dynamic just doesn't really connect well and doesn't really work compared to Pearl and Belle, and even at the end compared to Squishy and Belle. Belle just kind of works with Pearl's type of character, and Squishy's basically just a younger Pearl, so of course Belle's gonna bounce off Squishy much better than Pearl, who have similar personalities. I'm not going to criticize the author too much on this, mainly because this is more of a creative choice, and it doesn't really detract that much from the story. This is more of a personal issue. She just didn't connect with me. I do like all the little details about her design, like the octopus having like the crossed out eyes, and when she goes to the dark, she actually starts emitting bioluminescence. I think that's a neat detail. Her being stretchy is also really unique as well, and also consider the fact she's a slug. Her being like slimy to the touch, like you can touch her, like you come across like slime. That's common with slugs. That's just kind of what they're saying. Have her avoid salt. I don't know if sea slugs do the same thing with regular slugs when it comes to salt because of ocean water being salty. I actually don't. Is that? I should know that. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Point is, I can appreciate the attempt which Squishy's character the author was trying to do. I like the fact that the story was front loaded with Squishy's character kind of trying to introduce herself to the world and to the characters. I just don't think it really worked because the only character you have interacting with Squishy is Pearl and then later Benny. And Pearl doesn't really work. Benny works to the point he's kind of acting as like her mirror. Basically, Benny is basically Squishy's version of Belle, someone that directly interact with her and kind of bounce off. So you have Squishy with Benny, and then you have Pearl with Belle. I think that works, and it doesn't really work specifically with Pearl, at least in my opinion. Like I said, I don't hate Squishy's character. She just didn't really click with me, and I completely understand that this is a me thing, and I'm not gonna ask the author to change it because ultimately, this is just something that I think was just a byproduct of what the author wanted to do with the story of introducing Squishy to this world. I can't wait for probably Squishy to interact more with the bees, especially Benny and Belle. I think they're fine with that. So yeah, that is It Came from the Deep Sea. I want to apologize to the author for this. Again, what happened was completely my fault, and I'm completely taking responsibility on that. I will see you next time. This has been Dark Symphony 7, and cut.